So I've been with Big Ocean for almost a decade, and every single year we present at CSW. And each year we like to highlight, of course, in reference to the theme, we like to highlight the issues that our women are going through. This year and this spring, we've all watched the unraveling of a terribly dark sex trafficking ring come to light through the Epstein files. And I think all of us are feeling so outraged and like we don't know where to begin. I think we're all seeing a lack of justice, and it's so hard to conceptualize that. And we felt that sharing these stories was the most valuable thing we could do with our time here, with our limited influence um, on with CSW. It is so important to share these stories, these firsthand accounts. And I was so nervous to work on this presentation um, because I thought that it could become maybe too heavy or too difficult for people. But of course, Kara has a very good point that we do not shy away from difficult things. And I want it to be known that in the light of this terrible thing that's happening on a global scale, it's something that Big Ocean women have known about for years that is happening on a local scale. And I want it to be known that in the wake of this, we said something. We shared our stories. That's what matters to our children, to our future generations, which is what Big Ocean Women is all about. And also, throughout this week, throughout CSW, I have heard so many presenters sharing their own personal stories as well. And this has given me strength. Kara's story gives me strength. And I just want to thank you. If you are somebody listening and you have presented and you shared your story, thank you, thank you, thank you. Your story matters. Um, so now I have the opportunity to share mine as well. Okay, Nicole. Thank you, Nicole, by the way. Thank you, Anne, Nicole, all the Big Ocean women that are on the call today. So many hands have come together to help this presentation. Okay, so we know that everybody knows here that the priority theme this year is about justice. And as I was contemplating, I couldn't help but think about the time in my life that I felt the most unjust as well. Okay, trying to be as strong as Kara here. So, um, so when I was 11 years old, my father's colleague raped me. He recorded the violence and sold this footage along with images as child pornography. And my abuser is walking free today due to legal loopholes. His family claimed that when the police came to confiscate the material, they intimidated them, and so they were able to shorten his sentence, and he's walking free today. So, as I've contemplated how I wish he would see full justice, including a lifelong sentence, mostly to keep other children safe, I've come across many other stories of women who've also not seen justice for their abuse, like Kara. And this has helped me to realize that justice is brittle, justice is finicky, and that we live in a fundamentally unjust society. It's not guaranteed. And so I decided that it was important for me to share this story. Mostly, one, I want it to be clear that as we're talking about our outcome suggestions, there's credibility here. This is not hypothetical scenarios for us. This is real lived experience. I also know that there are people on this call, there are people that are going to be watching this um, on a YouTube video later who are survivors who have maybe never shared their experience with anybody. And I want you to know that your experience matters. I hope you hear my voice now. There are two things I want you to know. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you, Nicole. Number one, that through strong families, it is possible to create a world where sexual violence is not simply punished, but unthinkable. That is possible. And number two, when justice is not met, because the vast majority of the time it is not, healing is still possible and healing is worth it. That last part has been difficult for me to accept. Okay, so a few caveats here. Um, so much of my experience is similar to Kara's experience. When I talk about healing, I don't want it to sound like it's easy, like it's just the easy option. It's definitely not. It's very difficult. I suffer from PTSD that affects every aspect of my life. Sleep is a huge one that Kara talked about. Chronic illness, autoimmune diseases. It's affected my employment, my higher education, my faith, my social life. I'm forever changed. But I've been able to find meaning despite the pain. And that's really important. I also want to do an additional caveat here that I think a lot of people who talk about their abuse will say that they're grateful that their abuse happened because it turned them into the person they are today. And I want to say that I'm not grateful that my abuse happened. And it didn't turn me into the person I am today. I did. It did not make me stronger. I did. And I want all of the listeners who have been through something like this to understand that you deserve the credit for that and that you deserve the credit for your healing. At Big Ocean Women, we fundamentally believe in good, strong, and healthy families. And our suggestion today is that families are central to the purging of sexual violence that we are witnessing on a global scale and on a local scale. It is down to strong families. And I also want to say that we understand that so much of the abuse that's happening is happening within families. And so we are advocating for healthy, connective, vulnerable families. We still believe that despite the abuse, families are the solution. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Wonderful. Okay, so I want to talk about what causes sexual violence. We need to define some terms here in order to move forward. So the media seems to be saturated with the question right now, how did Epstein and his fellow abusers get away with it? We can talk about the blackmail, the corruption, the lack of justice. However, my fear is that by focusing on the how, we skip over the deeper question of why. Why would somebody abuse somebody in the first place, right? As citizens and family members, not necessarily as lawmakers, there is some preventative work in focusing on the how, but there's a lot more that we can do with the why. So getting to the why helps us to avoid victim blaming, like Kara mentioned, or pushing the notion that abuse is an inherent aspect of human life. It is not. So myths include the idea that sexual abuse is simply human nature, human biology, excuse me, or that testosterone plays a part in abuse. So these ideas have been debunked many times. Men with higher levels of testosterone do not abuse women at higher rates. People who are taking testosterone as a transitionary medication do not begin to become abusive people. This is simply not true. Ruth Whitman, an author and journalist, writes, evidence suggests that it is not innate aggression that makes men violent, but the internalized belief that they fall short of society's perceived standards for masculinity. Psychologists call this phenomenon masculine discrepancy stress. And research shows that the more acutely a man suffers from this, the more likely he is to commit almost every type of violence, including sexual assault, intimate partner violence, and assault with a weapon. So abuse is motivated by a compulsion to assert power or control over others, paired with the justification that victims are less deserving. It is important to understand that abuse is not tied to sexual desires, inherent sexual desires, and it's almost comical to say, but it needs to be said that abuse is not motivated by the victim's choices, by their clothing choices, by how drunk they are, right? By them changing their mind. These ideas are not only harmful, but they're simply ineffective in solving the issue. Okay, next slide. There should be a graph, like a pyramid. One more? Perfect. Okay, wonderful. So, the first argument that I often hear about this is, of course, not all men, right? We've all heard this one. And I want to talk about this graph here. So, since abuse is motivated by a desire to control others, no one is immune to being an abuser. The binary idea that there are good men and bad men removes the accountability that we all have, regardless of social class or gender, to do better and be better. Every person I know has contributed to rape culture in one way or another, myself included. I have not always stood up against the gossip of private events or rape jokes the way I could have. All men and all women are responsible to take accountability and call out damaging behavior when we see it. So this is a visual of rape culture that I actually made as a teenager because I was frustrated in trying to explain these concepts. I felt frustrated that my peers and the people that I was talking to, everybody seemed to know a victim, but nobody could understand how rapists are created. So I wanted to explain that rape does not spring from nowhere. It is normalized and justified in the minds of abusers over the course of their entire life, and it begins with dehumanization. Okay, so you can see on the right hand, that's kind of like the overarching theme. It begins with dehumanization and it fosters into victimization, which is the top kind of foundation there. And this looks like rape jokes, victim blaming, authority abuse, and then this builds into degradation. This looks like catcalling, upskirt photos, manipulation. This can escalate to a removal of autonomy. You guys are following the chart here. This looks like sexual coercion or drugging, and this is how we get to explicit violence. So these are not isolated events. Okay, next slide. So, yes, all men and all women have a responsibility to be better. So, in contrast, I made this graph as well. This is with the help of my Big Ocean mentors, specifically Carolina, if you remember this. I was like 17 when I made this. So this is a visual of life culture. So life culture is the same effect in the opposite direction, and this is the solution, and it's just as easily fostered as rape culture. So this begins with empowerment. This looks like open conversations, validation, body positivity, and this builds into a sense of dignity. So dignity looks like respect, confidence, and freedom in the individual. And then individuals with strong dignity are able to build healthy connection. So, connection is the single predictor of a healthy, happy life. Over and over again. And I've cited my sources. I think they're at the end of this presentation here. So, this looks like trust, commitment, and even romance. Um, I didn't point this out, but in the first slide, that kind of icon of healing, that was me and my husband. So romance is a huge proponent of life culture. And finally, we're able to build a physical and emotional bond that is safe, empowering, and beneficial for everybody. This is what safety looks like, not only in sexuality, but in human connection in general. This is important because, like Kara mentioned, it is easier to believe that there are monsters out there that abuse children and that we play no part in fostering abuse. It's easier to believe that all of the adults you know are simply good people and are completely sovereign from bad people. However, it's not that simple and it's not that easy. If we want to have a world that does not reward abuse, like our world currently is, we must begin with where we stand. Okay, next slide. So this is a powerful quote. He's a feminist author, and he talks about abuse of women. Jonah Mix here. He says, "I'm not interested in a world where men want to abuse but resist because they've been shamed. I'm interested in a world where men are raised from birth with such an unshakable understanding of women as living human beings that they are incapable of being aroused by their exploitation." So the last line here. I'm interested in a world where men are raised from birth with such an unshakable understanding of women. The first place that comes from is from powerful, healed, empowered mothers. Mothers have the single largest impact on their children to show what unshakable understanding of women as human beings looks like. That starts in the family. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is the second part of my message. When justice is not met, which it most of the time is not, healing is still possible and healing is worth it. Fatima talked about this, Kara talked about this. This is the main crux of our whole presentation. This is what I want everybody to take home. Okay, so to begin, let's talk about what trauma is. We need to better understand it. So when a traumatic event occurs, it physically alters our brains. So the prefrontal cortex physically shrinks, and this is our center for decision making and emotional regulation, and the hippocampus shrinks. This is where we store memory, so it's very common for memory blockages and dissociation for survivors. Kara talked about this. This has definitely been in my experience as well. And the amygdala becomes hyperactive. This is our fight or flight response. Luckily, through emotional and mental healing, your brain can physically heal as well. According to many studies, but specifically one done in 2018, connection via relationships is the most effective tool in healing the biomarkers of trauma. Okay, next. Okay, so what do abusers and victims have in common? Kara talked about shame, this shame that she feels. In all of the complex cases of abusers, victims, and everybody in between, shame damages us all. Shame is what keeps victims silent and stuck in trauma patterns, and shame is what perpetuates the culture that allows abuse to take place. So, Brené Brown, most of you know her, she's a very popular shame researcher. She says, I define shame as the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Something we've experienced, done, or failed to do makes us unworthy of connection. I don't believe shame is helpful or productive. In fact, I think shame is much more likely to be the source of destructive behavior than the solution or cure. I think the fear of disconnection can make us dangerous. She goes on to talk about how shame and guilt are two different things. There's a healthy amount of guilt, right, to reflect on bad actions. But shame is this belief that we are flawed, and it spirals into avoidance and isolation, a lack of connection. This is where it is very common to lash out to gain control, and this perpetuates the disconnection. So shame is a spiral that's dangerous. And the opposite of shame is vulnerability, as Dr. Brown explains. Connection and vulnerability is the best action we can take to simultaneously heal victims and prevent abusers. At the same time, it's one solution: vulnerability and connection. This is why policy support for the family unit is the best action forward to actually create justice. Okay, next. Okay, so these are some pictures of some of my favorite women in the whole world. These are some of our big ocean waves. So Big Ocean Women facilitates healing through organization in our local chapters or waves, as I've explained earlier. The women in our organization are not helpless, even when the state justice systems do not hear them. They take healing into their own hands. Our women are vulnerable and strong. Our global sisterhood is the epitome of growth, empowerment, and safety. Next. Okay, so this is the key. With or without policy reform, healing is possible. And there is no force more powerful to reform an abusive system than healed women, healed mothers, and I would add healed people as well. Next. So these are our policy recommendations that we have, an oral and written statement that we have added for the outcome document for CSW. The first is strengthening AI regulation by implementing accountability on a national level for the generation, distribution, or normalization of sexually explicit content, including synthetic or AI-generated exploitation. These crimes are not victimless. I could go on a whole nother presentation about this, about the content that was sold from me and my little 11-year-old body are currently informing the LLMs that are creating child porn that's AI generated today, right? These are not victimless crimes. We need better regulation on this. Number two is the support for policies and UN language that supports and preserves the role of the family unit as the foundation of society, recognizing healthy and good parents, keywords there, and caregivers as the moral guards in their well-being, protection, and development of children. And number three is we want to encourage accountability for all sexual abuse perpetrators, regardless of authority or wealth, including child exploitation and trafficking done across borders. Those are our asks. Okay, Carol, we're going to turn the time over to you, and then we'll have a quick Q&A.
Thank you so much. I hope you guys can hear me. It's such a pleasure to be with you. And I have to say, I was just holding back so many tears. Grace, I've known Grace since she was a little girl. And I know that today was really hard for you, and you did it. Just proud of Kara and proud of everybody. These are really hard topics, and I am very grateful for the fact that all of you are attending this with us and setting apart a bit of your day to learn more about these difficult issues. It speaks volumes to the people that you are and the work that you, I hope, will be called to engage in. We've heard some extremely challenging things during this presentation. We've heard stories of systems that overlook and they overlook at best, and in many ways they're complicit to the harm. We've heard of legal gaps and jurisdictional barriers. We've heard of trauma that impacts not just individuals, but generations. Next slide, please. So, for example, we've talked about, we are Big Ocean Women for faith, family, and motherhood, but we also don't close our eyes to the reality that in homes, 1 in 7 children experience abuse or neglect each year. We know that most abuse is committed by someone that the child knows or trusts, often within family or close relationships. This is the reality of it, and we don't shield our eyes to this. We also know, as Kara explained, that schools aren't necessarily, institutions or places where children are completely safe. Up to 17% of students actually report being targets of sexual misconduct by a school employee. This was a research discussed by Harvard Graduate School of Education based on their educator misconduct studies. And the author of the study is Shake Shaft, who is bringing this to light. We also know that in religious institutions, so we are Big Ocean Women for faith. We advocate for faith. We know that 83% of the women of the world are women who identify with the faith tradition. While this is true, our own religious institutions aren't free of this corruption. Thousands of investigations, tens of thousands of victims are identified just in the United States alone with being victims of abuse within their houses of worship and by clergy. And then we even gathered here together at this international forum, the United Nations. And even in this international forum, we have, 2,000 allegations of sexual exploitation from UN peacekeepers, including 300 cases of children that was under investigation. And, we understand, we have to be real here, that these systems will fail to protect the most vulnerable. They just do. Okay, the numbers don't tell us, however, that families, schools, churches, or international institutions are inherently unsafe. What they do is tell us that every system created to protect children requires vigilance. It requires moral integrity by the people that inhabit them. So it requires good men and good women, fathers and mothers, to step into their true leadership and expand their influence. That is what the call is for you to do today, that you have a direct role in every area of your life, in your home, in your schools, in your churches, in the international arena, and everywhere in between, to be vigilant and to make people accountable, even by calling things out when you, just like Grace shared about her diagram, to not be complicit in the culture that we are creating. This is what it means to be a true leader. Okay, next slide. So amidst all of these systemic failures, so many ways that fail to protect the most vulnerable, there's a common theme, and I hope that you've seen it today, a thread of tremendous hope that weaves between so many stories of survival. So even though systems have failed to protect, there's this incredible phenomenon that happens. It's this ripple effect of women's true leadership. When women heal and rise, the outcome is magnificent. Children gain safety, families regain stability, communities rebuild trust, and society becomes stronger. This is the essence of Big Ocean Women model of powerful impact. We talk about it all the time. We can't deny the fact that when one woman speaks out, her courage in the face of violence creates a ripple effect. Communities begin to listen and to take note and open their eyes. That's the first ripple outward. And then one woman refusing to give up impacts other women, mothers, sisters, friends to see and to listen and to advocate along with her. And we counsel together in these groups, which we call waves. And then we discuss ideas for action. So in essence, a mother rising can impact in her home, can impact in her school, in her church, in her community, and even in international systems. Next slide. The truth is, we don't just fill in the gaps. We are actually the cement mortar between the gaps that keeps society standing in the face of collapse. Throughout history, this has been the only system robust enough to withstand system collapse. And it's about time we start expanding our understanding of justice, because justice doesn't just work within these structured systems within society. Justice actually begins in healing from the inside out, in healing trauma deep within us. This is the work that we have to do. This is the work that we have to engage in. And everyone has experienced some form of trauma in their life. And so when we begin this healing journey, legal accountability and restoration begin working together. It gives us this unquenching drive to continue to protect the next generation. And that intensity, it just builds and builds and builds. And so it begins when good adults expand their moral authority in the protection of children. Community restoration can happen as we advocate for truth and use our faith that provides us the internal resilience and drive to overcome these crimes in the first place. This is what true advocacy looks like. It is rooted deep inside, and it has to come from a place of healing. If it doesn't come from a place of healing, what I've seen with my own eyes, what happens is there's this big light, this big fire that's lit, and it's an insatiable fire, and it can consume even the victim, which we don't want to happen. What we need is just an ember that just burns strong through the years and that can improve with each generation. And this is what we call maternal authority in action. And this is what Big Ocean Women train others, other women throughout the world in this true leadership model. Next slide. Throughout these discussions, we can see something powerful emerge. We can see that women are not waiting for systems to be repaired before healing begins. Across the world, mothers and women are already doing the quiet work of justice every day. They're protecting children. They're sheltering the vulnerable. They're preserving faith, dignity, and culture in places where law and policy have turned a blind eye. These women are living witnesses that healing does not only come through institutions, it rises through human relationships, through faith, courage, compassion, and the instinct to protect life. One of the most powerful forces we see across every culture represented here is a maternal drive to safeguard the rising generation. When a mother stops the cycle of abuse for even one child, something profound happens. She not only protects that child's future, she also heals something within herself, just like Kara talked about little Kara. It's almost like you can travel back in time and actually rescue that younger version of yourself. And deep healing happens when we can provide it for other people. When women stand together, believing and believing in one another, protecting one another, refusing to let harm define that next generation, they become architects of stability in their families and communities, which is the foundation of justice to begin with. In light of the massacre happening to Christians in Nigeria and throughout the world, I wish to exercise my free will in showing my source of healing and strength, what has always been and will always be Jesus Christ. I am happy and grateful for Jesus Christ of Nazareth, my personal anchor, my Savior and friend, that He has never left me comfortless. And that strength has enabled me to carry on in my darkest days. I couldn't end my presentation today without expressing where exactly my hope and my strength resides. Next slide. And now at Big Ocean Women, we are big believers in action. We believe that awareness has to lead to action. So we invite, as women of faith, we know that powerful action begins with prayer. Prayer is where courage is born, and it's where clarity comes, and it's where quiet promptings of action really begins. We invite you to pray for wisdom, for courage, and for insight into what each of us can personally do to better protect the women and children in our families and communities. Pray individually, pray as families, pray with others, pray with solidarity, but don't stop there. Prayer only prepares the heart, but it also calls us to move. We have prepared a mother's advocacy toolkit that we can share with you if you send us your email here in the chat. We will send you these educational resources and opportunities for action. We don't want you just to walk away from this presentation and say, well, that was great. This is just the beginning. We have a lot of work to do together. You have already taken the first step simply by being here today. The next steps are within our reach too, which is it could be sharing verified research, discussing these issues with your communities, with your families, supporting survivor-led organizations, to engage in elected leaders, in participating in advocacy efforts, and in teaching children, okay, in age-appropriate ways, all about dignity, safety, and the sacred worth of every human life. Because when women pray and then when women act, something truly remarkable happens. That's when justice systems fail, we see mothers rise. Thank you so much for coming today. We also want to share the next slide, which is our tenant calendar. And we are happy to share this tenant calendar with you as well, if there is interest, and you can follow along in our 12 tenets. Every month we discuss one of these principles, one of these truths that anchor us together. We encourage you to use the language maternal feminism, and in these tenets, this is where our true power lies. So we always invite everyone to join us in speaking these truths in connection with one another as a global sisterhood. We thank you so much for spending time with us, and now we can open it up to a little bit of, I don't know if we have time for Q&A.